In the fight for civil rights, the front line was always going to be somewhere. And it just so happens that it's here in Florida. And there isn't a world where I could imagine being anywhere but on it, fighting alongside the people that I love dearly.
Everybody, welcome to Keeping Watch. I'm just very excited to have you all on here. We've got some really great guests coming up in a little bit. Brandon Wolf, Press Secretary with Equality Florida, and Ida Eskamani. So before we dive into the guests that I have on the show, let's go through a little bit of the news that's been going on lately. So first of all, biggest thing in the news lately, education. People have been talking about education. You know, we've got the AP African American history stuff going on. But nationally, I found this really, really fascinating. I read in Salon.com that Congresswoman Lauren Boebert out of Colorado, somebody that has railed against comprehensive sex education in schools, specifically wanting to cut funding from that program, just announced that her 17-year-old son will be making her a 36-year-old grandmother. Thought that was kind of an interesting line there. Another thing, so book bans. According to popular information, there has been some pushback around folks talking about the book banning that's happening in the state of Florida. So the state of Florida right now is number 2 in the country for the amount of books that K through 12 schools are banning. And that's because of HB 7, also known as the Stop Woke Act. I like to call it the Stop Learning Act. And the governor had a press conference with a big, sign that says, "Oh, book banning is a hoax." Well, if you have to backpedal, right, we're having some serious problems. Book banning is a real thing. We have videos, we have photos, we have teachers coming out talking about it. We even had a substitute get fired because they released a video of evidence of book bans. And now we want to go back and talk about how it's a hoax. Okay. Next thing, Florida lawmakers' answer to the insurance crisis make it harder to sue the insurers. This is coming out of the Herald Times and Tallahassee Bureau. Apparently, Floridians are paying the highest auto and homeowners insurance premiums in the nation. And those rates are going to continue to rise. And we all know that the legislature had at least one most recent special session to address this, and it actually made things worse. There was a special session before that to address it. It seems like this sort of never-ending problem that keeps popping up like whack-a-mole in the state of Florida. Finally, coming out of Florida politics, College Board isn't all bad. DeSantis cites SAT standardizing testing to diss diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's really interesting because on the one hand, the governor does not like the College Board because of the AP African American Studies course that he had banned, and is saying that potentially, if they don't change things based on what he wants, he's going to ban all AP courses in the state of Florida. But when it comes to talking mess about DEI programs, now all of a sudden we love the College Board. Okay. Coming up next, we'll be talking to Brandon J. Wolf, Press Secretary of Equality Florida, about all the craziness that's happening in Florida. And we really don't have a shortage of any of the craziness. So the conversation will be very, very interesting. Stay tuned.
Since you are here enjoying our show, please make sure to follow us on all of our socials so you can experience all Florida Watch and Keeping Watch news and information. We are at Florida Watch on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. While you're at it, check out our website at floridawatch.org and our partner website at progressflorida.org.
Very excited to have Brandon Wolf on with us today. He's the Press Secretary for Equality Florida. Brandon is a nationally recognized gun safety and LGBTQ plus civil rights advocate. I know him as a dynamic public speaker, really enjoyed the speaking engagement when we went to the gala here for Equality Florida in Tallahassee just a few weeks ago. And we're just so happy to have you. Welcome, Brandon.
Thank you. Great to be here.
How are you?
That feels like a loaded question. I am, I'm in the state capitol. I'm in Tallahassee, so it's a difficult time to be up here. It's really challenging to watch these lawmakers move in concert with one another in service to Ron DeSantis's presidential ambitions, to watch them totally disregard the voices of their own constituents. But it's also really empowering to see so many people show up to continue to be heard. We've got 200 plus people on the ground in Tallahassee this week with us at Equality Florida for Pride at the Capitol. And we had a really powerful moment yesterday when we were in this Omnimax theater at the Challenger Learning Center. We're going through some training together with everyone. And we asked for whom it was their first time doing lobbying in Tallahassee, and 90% of people in the room raised their hands. This is a group that has been inspired and mobilized, based on all of the things that we've been working on over the last year or two. So while it's challenging to be here, it's certainly a difficult time to be here. I'm really inspired by the community and everyone who's shown up to fight back.
Well, I'm inspired by you. I mean, thank you for being in the lion's den, so to speak.
Yeah, somebody has to be up here.
Somebody's got to do it, right? So yeah, that's actually really awesome. And I can't wait to dive in a little bit more about the Equality Florida Lobby Days. But for listeners that maybe aren't familiar with who you are, if you wouldn't mind just sort of sharing a little bit more about yourself, just in general terms.
Yeah, sure. I've been in Florida for a number of years now. I consider myself a Floridian. I'm not a Floridian by birth, but I am a Floridian by choice, which, depending on what city I'm visiting, elicits a different kind of reaction every single time. But I love Florida. I chose Florida in 2008, moving from very rural Oregon, 3,000 miles away with nothing more than a couple of suitcases. I worked at Disney for a number of years. I had a career at Starbucks for a long time. And have really fallen in love with the Orlando community. I got involved in the fight for advocacy. I never had grand dreams of conversations like this or, talking about policy and politics. I really was, had in my mind that I was going to lead a corporate career at Starbucks and maybe move back to Seattle and work in HR for some time. And all of that really changed for me when the Pulse nightclub shooting happened. I am very lucky to have gone to Pulse that night and made it out with my life. Unfortunately, my best friends, Drew and Juan, were not so lucky, and there were 47 others who didn't make it out to say goodbye to their parents either. And for me, that moment really changed the way I see myself in this work, in this community. I realized in that moment that we all have a deep obligation to create, places of safety and belonging for people around us. So everything shifted. My work shifted. My life shifted. I, started, volunteering in the gun violence prevention movement. I started understanding the political process more fully. I founded an organization called the Drew Project. I still sit on the board of that organization today that gets resources to LGBTQ young people to help them, find that sense of safety and belonging in school and then go off and achieve their wildest dreams through higher education. And ultimately that led me in 2019 to leave my corporate career and go to work full-time at Equality Florida as the organization's press secretary. And now I have the honor every single day working at the state's LGBTQ civil rights organization of helping people learn to tell their stories, of helping amplify the voices of LGBTQ Floridians, of helping people understand what it really looks and feels like to live in the state of Florida, especially under the authoritarian rule of Ron DeSantis. So often in this work, our stories have been the catalyst for change, right? The marriage equality movement was driven by people telling their stories, people holding hands with one another and saying, my love is love and deserves to be recognized. The LGBTQ civil rights movement in general has been fueled by people saying, I am your friend, I am your neighbor, I am your family member, listen to my story and hear why I deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. So I just feel very honored that every day I get to not only help share my own story, but help teach other people to share theirs as well.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. It's every time I'm familiar with a good amount of your story, but just hearing it coming from you directly is incredibly powerful for me. And, very sorry about your friends, very sorry about what happened. at Pulse, but also very grateful that it became something that you were able to turn into, hopefully, a force for good, right? And, anytime that we can take tragedies in our lives, and use them as a sort of a motivator for good, I think is a good thing, even though it doesn't, change the loss. So I definitely feel that with you.
Thank you.
And, I find it very interesting that you and I sort of have some similarities when it comes to the native Floridian thing. I am also not native, and I'm also a Floridian by choice. My story started in 2003. And like you, I think I remember you saying something along the lines of, they're going to have to pry those beaches out of your hands, right?
That's right. That's right. I'm not giving up the white sandy beaches. That's why I'm here.
Absolutely not. And, it's interesting because I know that I have a feeling you share some similar sort of experiences on social media with folks that are like, well, just move. Heck no, I ain't moving. I'm staying right here. I want to make this place better. Right. And that's why we do what we do. Is why not? Why not dream bigger and better, and have it all? Why can't we have the sandy beaches and the Florida that we love, and also it be an inclusive place where people like you and I can exist in peace, and safety, and be embraced by our state.
We deserve that. I mean, that's the bare minimum. We deserve that. And really, there's two things for me, because I see it too, and I also see the people with the Bugs Bunny meme sawing Florida off and sending it into the Atlantic Ocean. That's cute. It's unrealistic, but it's cute for social media content. But the truth is, there's a lot of privilege to be able to suggest that someone can just uproot their entire life, especially if they have kids and a family, and move somewhere else.
Hello?
Who's paying for that? Are you offering someone, grants for them to move to Manhattan, the most expensive city in the United States? These things are not realistic for a lot of people, and there's an immense amount of privilege to suggest that that the millions of LGBTQ Floridians and allied Floridians that are living here are just going to pick up the roots and go somewhere else. And the second is that, this is something my executive director, Nadine Smith, says so often. She probably says it more eloquently than I, but I'll give it a shot. She says that in the fight for civil rights, the front line was always going to be somewhere. And it just so happens that it's here in Florida. And there isn't a world where I could imagine being anywhere but on it, fighting alongside the people that I love dearly. I couldn't imagine right now being, in a safe blue haven, living in San Francisco, and just, looking at what's happening in Florida from afar, because Florida is my home. And I love the community here. I love the people here. I believe that all Floridians deserve a voice in government, in politics, in the future of our state. And I just couldn't imagine myself anywhere but on the front lines fighting for that.
I'm so glad we have you. I just need to just appreciate
you. Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be in it with you.
So, okay, that's perfect. So speaking of being on the front lines, right? So lobby days, for folks at home that aren't sure what that is, different people come up to Tallahassee here where I live, to talk to lawmakers about the issues that matter the most to them. And so that's what lobby days are. And so different organizations that advocate for different issues or different people or whatever you would like to say with that, come here and say, hey, lawmakers, these are the things that we want to prioritize. These are the things we encourage you to prioritize. But Brandon, I'm going to let you sort of talk a little bit more about Equality Florida specifically and the lobby days and the work that you all are doing up here.
Yeah, thank you. So our, coming up to Tallahassee every year is a pride and joy of Equality Florida. And I should say, Equality Florida has been around since, 1997? And up until 2021, we were successful in killing every explicitly anti-LGBTQ piece of policy that came through the legislature. That changed with the trans sports ban, but that has been fueled, that 24-year run of killing all of those bad bills was really fueled by bringing people to Tallahassee, by bringing our advocates to Tallahassee, putting them in front of lawmakers, scheduling meetings, whether they're with Republicans or Democrats, bringing people to hearing rooms, getting people access to the political process has allowed us to be successful in pushing back against anti-LGBTQ policy. We're in a different moment. politically. Certainly, that is being driven by Ron DeSantis's desperation to be president of the United States. It's being driven by right-wing politicians who are obsessed with seeing themselves trend on Twitter or get another crack at a Newsmax chyron. But that doesn't mean we stop showing up. And what I'm really excited about this year with our Pride at the Capitol Lobby Days program is that it's not just 2 days. Typically, we do a couple of days, we bring people up. We're mobilizing for 7, 8 straight weeks. We're inviting people to come up to Tallahassee to join us. We'll put you to work. We'll give you some meetings to attend. We'll put you in hearing rooms. And our mantra this session really is every single place they show up to try to peel back our civil rights, we're going to show up to challenge them. We're never going to leave a room unchallenged. We're never going to leave a meeting unattended. We're always going to take every opportunity to put LGBTQ voices in the conversation. And that serves a number of purposes, right? Like on the one hand, the political climate tells us these politicians are not changing their mind because we showed up to a hearing room and told them how awful their political actions are. But the outside world sees it. LGBTQ young people see that, and they know that people are fighting for them. Students see that, and they get inspired, they get mobilized to leave class, to walk out into the streets, to demand a different kind of Florida. And the fact that we're present and visible in those spaces is a reminder to everyone in this building that we belong here too, that this is our Florida too. So I'm really excited about Pride at the Capitol, about Lobby Days. This is the largest contingent I've ever seen. I think it's the largest in our organization's history to have, I think, around 200 people in the Capitol. And again, it's just week one of a 7-week, 8-week program. We invite people, come on up. Anytime you're in Tallahassee, get connected with us. We're going to put you to work.
That's awesome. Where can they, is there a website or that they can sign up?
Yeah, I would say head to equalityflorida.org. And right there on the very top, you'll see a link to our Pride at the Capitol program. That'll get you plugged in with our volunteer leadership team, our field team, and they'll pull you in.
That's awesome. Do they get a free rainbow flag for signing up?
I don't know about I don't know if we have flags, but we certainly have swag. We had T-shirts yesterday. We had like stickers and pins, and yeah, there's all sorts of stuff. And honestly, the sense of community for me is what's been so remarkable. We had a press conference outside the Senate chambers yesterday, and just to have 200 people in there chanting and holding signs and being in community with one another, that feels good.
So for people that maybe aren't able to come up to Tallahassee, are there other ways that they can support Equality Florida's Lobby Days?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, we encourage people to share their stories wherever they are, right? We're really excited because if you go to equalityflorida.org, you tune in to our resistance reports. It's our new weekly update that's on our website. You'll see it there listed under our blog posts. You'll get plugged into how you can engage in a digital way. We're really excited that we made, there's these posters, you may have seen them if you checked out our press conference, that say free states don't ban, and there's a blank and you can fill it in with the sort of things that free states don't ban. And then we've got another one that says ban blank, not books. And so we've made some of those graphics available to people to print out their own and post it on social media. So that's one way you can get engaged, is digitally through social media, sharing your own story, tagging lawmakers, telling them to defeat these bills. That resistance report gives you all the information you need to be an expert on the policies. And then, of course, if you want to support financially, we would really welcome financial contributions to Equality Florida. Just as a flavor, those helped get people to Tallahassee this week. They helped cover travel. They helped cover accommodations. Especially, we've got parents of trans kids who are able to bring their trans kids up here. We were able to help put them in Airbnbs and get them gas to get up here. So any way you can help, we welcome it, whether it's financially, some of your time, some of your treasure. We would love to have you engaged in the process, even if you can't make it to Tallahassee.
That's awesome. I didn't even think about that, right? The monetary contribution for folks that are at a distance. But it really does matter, right? Because you all aren't, you're a nonprofit, right? So
right. It's
not like you can just, you're not like a business, you're doing this advocacy work, with the help of the community of Floridians. I mean, so there are over 20 million of us. And if we all pitched in some way, we could actually make real change. And it's so encouraging. earlier when you were talking about the ability to kill awful bills. And I long for the day when you all come up here and are, instead of pushing to kill bills, you're pushing for supporting good bills that are helpful to the community.
Yeah. I long for
Yeah.
that day
So
too.
right, we'll get there. I feel like we'll get there.
We will.
But we kind of got to also, after all this wonderful stuff we're talking about, we do need to talk about a little bit about why, what you all are doing is so important. And so we're going to talk about like the attacks that are happening. So these bad bills that you're working to kill, can you briefly talk with us about sort of what's happening in session this year that is so harmful to the LGBTQ community, please?
Sure. Yeah. This has been a several year maturation process, right? And really it's being fueled by a couple things. On the one hand, you have these national, right-wing zealot organizations like Moms for Liberty, the Heritage Foundation, the Alliance Defending Freedom, and their entire purpose has been to peel away LGBTQ progress, right? They've been in their think tanks, their war rooms for years trying to figure out what the next culture war issue is that allows them space to begin to erode some of the civil rights protections that we've won. And then on the other hand, you have politicians like Ron DeSantis and his allies in the legislature who don't actually care about the outcome for LGBTQ people or really for people at all. They're in it for the political ambition, right? They're in it for access to power, wealth, and fame. And for Ron DeSantis, that looks like running for president and sitting behind the desk in the Oval Office. So for people like that, cruelty is currency, right? That the anti-LGBTQ extremist movement is a vehicle to get where they're going. And the merging of these two groups, the zealots and the political mercenaries, is what has created this national firestorm. It started for us in earnest in 2021 with the ban on trans kids participating in sports. If you remember, the right wing insisted that their focus was very narrow. They were just really worried about girls' sports and fairness on athletic teams. LGBTQ people told folks at that time that that was a Trojan horse, that worse was coming, that they were just, a focus grouping their anti-LGBTQ agenda. And so then 2022 rolls around, we get the Don't Say LGBTQ bill filed. We get, that bill makes it over the finish line. These attacks are now in education. Then the governor starts weaponizing state agencies against the community, the Board of Medicine, the Board of Osteopathy, the Department of Business and Professional Regulations, all bent toward this anti-LGBTQ agenda. And now here we are. In this legislative session, we've seen over 20 anti-LGBTQ bills filed. Many of them have already begun moving. Yesterday, we had hearings on a number of bills that are on our legislative slate. Again, if you go to equalityflorida.org, you can see our entire slate. But some of the things that jump out to me are, this is a broad swath of attacks, whether it's education, healthcare, arts and entertainment. They are directly aimed at erasing LGBTQ people, and they're animated by a belief that trans people are not real, a bigoted belief that trans people are inventing their lived experience, that it is all in their imaginations, and the only way to stop their imaginary identity from spreading to other people, this idea that they're a contagion, is for the right wing of our country to use the levers of government to punish them so severely that they go into hiding. That is that's what's animating all of these horrible, atrocious bills. And so we've got a number of them. Folks are probably familiar with the bills to criminalize gender-affirming care. Those bills are basically designed to rip away parents' rights to go to the doctor and get the very best health care available for their trans kids. One of those bills, Senate Bill 254, threatens parents and doctors with prison time for accessing gender-affirming care. It gives Florida courts the power to dissolve custody agreements from other states, to rip children out of a home, upend their family, and put them with an unsupportive parent who wants to forcibly detransition them. We've also seen bills filed to expand the Don't Say LGBTQ provisions to 8th grade. We've seen bills filed attacking, drag art and LGBTQ performance venues. So there's a whole broad swath of attacks. They're focused on education, healthcare, arts, and entertainment, and they're all animated by this idea that the right wing has to use government to punish and erase LGBTQ people, specifically trans and non-binary people, to stop our spread in society. It's incredibly bigoted, it's incredibly dangerous, and it's going to do a ton of damage before we're done.
So, Brady, that's horrific. First of all, I think about, gosh, what's left for them to do? Because I know every session, it seems like it keeps getting worse and worse. But really, more than anything, how does this make you feel?
Yeah, listen, it's really hard to be an LGBTQ person in America right now with this onslaught against the community, but it's especially hard to be an LGBTQ person in Florida. Remember that, the legislative attacks are one thing, the political agenda is one thing. Remember that it comes with a lot of hostile and dangerous rhetoric as well. Remember that during the Don't Say LGBTQ fight last year, the governor's press secretary is who launched the anti-LGBTQ smear campaign, calling us groomers, accusing us of posing a threat to children simply for existing. In the wake of that, the Human Rights Campaign found that anti-LGBTQ, I'm putting in air quotes, groomer language, spiked 400% online as a result of the governor's office trafficking in those disgusting tropes. And it was showing up in, the Twitter mentions or Instagram comments of teenagers. I saw an LGBTQ young person, high schooler, post a prom photo. And all of a sudden, these right-wing trolls who had been sicked on them from the governor's office were saying some of the most disgusting things I've seen online. And all of that, of course, weighs heavily on people. You see teachers fleeing the profession. In January, we had 7,500 teacher vacancies in the state of Florida, and teachers are telling us it's just not worth it anymore. If you tell me that I pose a threat to children every day I walk into my classroom, you don't pay me enough, you don't give me the resources I need to teach the kids, I don't want to do it anymore. There was a study done, too, of LGBTQ parents, for instance, by the Williams Institute out of UCLA, and it showed that over 50% of those parents, over 50% of those families considered leaving Florida because they don't think it's safe to raise their children in our state anymore. And of course, we know that young people are bearing the brunt of this most intensely. LGBTQ youth suicide attempts spiked in 2021 for the first time in a really long time, as we saw from the CDC's Youth Risk Behavior Survey. You want to know what the response was from Governor Ron DeSantis? He pulled Florida's 30-year participation in that survey altogether, accusing the survey of sexualizing children. We got bad data that said more young people are in mental health crisis today than we've seen in a really long time, and our governor's response was to stop asking the question entirely. This is an incredibly dangerous moment in Florida, and when you ask how it feels for me, it's heartbreaking to see so many people put in a position of being afraid to call Florida their home anymore because of the extreme policies and agenda of this governor and his allies.
I mean, it just seems really intentional to me, right? It's almost like that's what they want. I mean, whether it's driving us out for being LGBTQ, driving us out for being Black, right, with all the Black attacks on education, or the way that they're taking over New College and our state university systems, just anyone and everyone that isn't who they want, the government wants us to be. Like, if we don't conform to what they want to either have us be hurt by other people or basically scared out of the state, right? And it's right. Which is really interesting, because for the guy that says that he wants to Florida America, what does that mean for America, right? Like, are you going to drive us out of the country at some point too? Like, is this kind of anyway, sorry. This is just awful. And I just can't even, I don't know how we do it. Sometimes.
Well, this is the other thing that our executive director says is, we've been here before, right? We've been here before with fewer resources and fewer allies than we have now. And at the same time, certainly in the LGBTQ civil rights movement, at every point of great tension, there was always something more beautiful than we could have comprehended just over those hurdles, right? People didn't pick up bricks at Stonewall Inn and riot against the police, imagining that just decades later, the globe would pour into the streets for pride festivals. But that's what was waiting over that hurdle. So I hear you, and I feel that a lot. Like, I don't know how we keep doing it, but I think that's what fuels me, is this idea that something great is just over these obstacles. And the right wing wouldn't be fighting back so intensely if they hadn't already lost culture and society.
100%. I'm going to hold on to that. I'm going to replay that.
Hold on to it. Okay.
When I'm having those days where I'm like, what am I doing? Wow. Yeah. I mean, okay. So that's actually a perfect segue to sort of call to action for listeners, or anything else that, aside from the things that you mentioned, or if there's anything you want to reiterate for folks, as far as now that they've heard all the things that are going on and they're inspired finally, like, I don't know where they've been, but hey, you're here with us. If they can do something about this.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is to just get engaged in the process. Part of the right-wing strategy is to make people feel isolated, to make them feel alone in this fight, and to sap people of their will or desire to be a part of the process, right? This defeatism of, oh, Florida is a lost cause, it's a deep red state now, it's never coming back, it's not worth our investment. That's part of the right-wing strategy. Part of the right-wing strategy is to get us to stop investing in the future of Florida. My challenge is that we have to show up, because this is our state too. This is our home too. Florida is worth fighting for, and that's why we continue to show up to fight for it. So my first ask for people is just get engaged. Get engaged in the process. Figure out where you can have a voice, where you can have the most impact. And that may not be, sitting in a hearing room in Tallahassee. That may not be the thing that makes sense for you. It could be talking to your neighbors. It could be, getting courageously curious about your own discomfort about things. If you found yourself listening and the one thing you got uncomfortable with is like, yeah, I'm with you all the way, except I don't understand trans kids in sports. That's the space you have to begin to understand people more deeply. Those butterflies in your stomach are telling you that there's an opportunity to get to know someone new, to understand an issue that you don't understand today. So get curious about the world around you and be willing to have those difficult, uncomfortable dialogues with people in our communities so that they'll get engaged too, so that they'll understand why people are deserving of dignity and respect. And of course, I'll plug Equality Florida. Would love to have people involved. Go to equalityflorida.org. Come up to Tallahassee, spend time with us, get involved digitally, make a financial contribution if you can. Any way you can be involved with us, we would encourage you to. We will get you plugged into the process and help amplify your voice.
That's perfect. Yes, I'm excited. I don't know. You just got me excited about
Great.
Doing more. So awesome. Thank you for that. I know you've got a book.
I do.
Coming. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind just sort of talking to us a little bit about your book. I'm excited.
Yeah, thank you. I did. I wrote my first book. My debut memoir comes out July 1st. It's available for pre-order. You can find it at amazonbookshop.org. It's called A Place for Us. And what I'm really excited about with this book, when I was first pitching it to the publisher, they said, so is it a book about Pulse? Is it a book about your experience at Pulse? And I said, kind of. Pulse is actually only one chapter in this book. And the reason that it's only one chapter is because Pulse, the events that happened on June 12th of 2016, won't matter to you. They won't have the gravity necessary to you if you don't understand why spaces like Pulse exist in the first place. So I have to take you all the way back to the beginning, to what it felt like to grow up as a queer person of color in this country, what it felt like to run away from home and discover chosen family for the first time, what it felt like to be loved unconditionally for the first time, and what it felt like to have that safety, that belonging ripped away in such violent fashion. And then we get into the part of, how do we recover from that? How do we heal from that? I think it's a book, not just about being a queer person of color, not just about loss and grief. It's also a book about overcoming adversity, learning to forgive ourselves, learning to be authentic. And I hope that some of those themes speak to everyone, even if you haven't had some of those lived experiences, that everyone can understand what it feels like to seek belonging in the world and hopefully find power in a sense of purpose.
It sounds beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm very much looking forward to reading it. And it also sounds to me like you have lived multiple lifetimes.
It feels like
in
that.
Your life.
I think that's the ache in my knees. Maybe it could be explained by that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just, I don't know. I just think there's just so much there that you've experienced that I think a lot of people will live their entire lives and maybe not even scratch the surface of. And to think that you've been able to pour that all into a book, is just incredibly beautiful that you're sharing that with the world. I know that I can't imagine that that's an easy thing to do, but I think it's wonderful. And I think that it's going to be something that's going to touch a lot of people in ways that maybe they won't even realize until they've read it. So
Thank
I
you.
invite folks to check the book out, and I can't wait.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just really, this is just really great. I'm really glad that we were able to have you on our program, sharing the good work that you're doing, your organization, the importance of advocating for just other human beings.
Right.
Like at the end of the day, folks, whatever label, whatever, way we choose to define ourselves, don't have fear, because we're really just people, right?
That's right.
At the core of it all. And we all are deserving of love and respect and, a place in this world.
But at the end of the day, there are a lot of things we don't understand about each other. There are a lot of people I don't understand. There are a lot of lived experiences I haven't had, but we're people. And when we get down to the core of treating each other as people, treating each other as humans first, treating each other with a basic level of dignity and respect, that's where our advocacy stems from. So again, as I'm thinking about getting people encouraged to be engaged, to be involved, that's it. If you believe that people are deserving of a basic level of dignity and respect in the state of Florida, then you're halfway on your advocacy journey already.
So Brandon, if you could say anything to the young people, 14-year-old, LGBT kids here in Florida, anything, what would that be?
Oh my gosh, there's so many things, and I think about 14-year-old me and how hard life was back then. I grew up in a really small rural town outside of Portland, Oregon, and I felt alone a lot. When I was in high school, was at the height of the fight against marriage equality. My home state of Oregon banned same-sex marriage by constitutional amendment when I was a sophomore in high school. And I remember what it felt like to watch adults spend all day, every day, hysterical about whether or not I had a right to be seen and valued, whether or not my love was as valuable as other people's love. And I just know how hurtful it can be. I know how difficult those moments can be. And so if I could say anything to 14-year-old me, I would say that you are not alone, that you are not isolated, that there are millions of people who love you, who care for you. And what I'd say to LGBTQ young people today is that we are those people. There's a reason that Equality Florida brought 200 of our closest friends to Tallahassee and will keep mobilizing for 7 straight weeks. There's a reason that we don't stop showing up after that we show up to school board meetings, we show up to the Board of Medicine hearings, we show up each and every day because you're worth fighting for. Your life is worth fighting for. Your future is worth fighting for. We love you. We care for you. Please don't give up hope. There is something brighter on the horizon, and we're just fighting for it together so that you can eventually have the life you deserve.
Thank you so much, Brandon, for joining us and sharing so many important pieces of wisdom and about, things about yourself and just sort of, the struggle to, achieve that equality that every type of Floridian deserves. So thank you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Up next, we're going to be talking with Ida Eskamani. I like to call her a people's advocate, for a session update.
Nothing changes in local or national politics unless you vote. And due to recent changes in Florida law, all requests for vote-by-mail ballots expired at the end of 2022. To continue to receive an absentee ballot and be able to vote by mail, contact your local supervisor of elections at myfloridaelections.com/contact-your-SOE and request your absentee ballot today.
So I'm really excited to have somebody that I've actually been working with since the beginning of my political career, Florida politics, Ida Eskamani. We go way back to working in the Florida House together. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you for having me, Natasha. Yeah, I feel like we've got some serious trauma bonds, girl. So being in the trenches for a long time together. So it's great to share this virtual space with you.
Absolutely. So if you could just sort of give us a background about your experience. I mean, I know for me, you're everywhere, but just tell us about yourself and your work in Florida politics overall, if you can.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, like I said, my name is Ida Eskamani. Born and raised in Orlando, Florida, daughter of immigrants from Iran, working class parents. So I'm a lifelong Floridian. And for the last 10 plus years, I've been working in Florida politics. I started as a student organizer. I've worked for groups like Equality Florida, and in other social justice organizations. And in the last 6 years, I've been on the ground in the Florida Capitol. 2 years as legislative aide, 4 years as an advocate, and I just continued to work, really trying to push the people's agenda in the state capitol, which a lot of times is a lot of fights, and you're trying to stop bad things from happening. But sometimes we've had some wins too on some really important issues. But it takes a lot of people power. I always say our opponents, the far right, the corporate donors, they're trying to buy what we are building, but it's priceless, right? But we got to keep building people power. So that's the quick and dirty of, the last 10 plus years of, blood, sweat, and a lot of tears in the state of Florida.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I know for me, I just feel like you're everywhere. I feel like if it's anything to do with specifically progressive policies, ideas, I feel like Ida's got, I was gonna say the Eskamanis, we can get into that in a second, but I feel like you all, just have your hand in everything. I mean, I feel like whether it's on a Zoom or emails or a summary of the bills that are moving, that kind of thing. I mean, you're just kind of everywhere. And then that leads me to the fact that you might actually seem like you're everywhere because you also have a twin sister.
I have a double.
Right. There are two of you somehow. I don't know how Florida got blessed with the both of you, but can you tell us a little bit about your sister too?
Absolutely. And that's too kind. And I always forget to mention that I have a twin sister because for me, that's just my life. That's, it's just my day to day, but I know it's a big thing, especially because she is Representative Ida Eskamani, a Peoples Champion representing the Orlando area. We're roommates as well. We're best friends, soulmates. I think we are everything to each other. And yeah, she's my representative, and she's an incredible champion for everyday people. And I feel very fortunate to have her representing me and to call her my twin. And so, yes, when you are often seeing double, because there are indeed two of us.
I think that's the only way you guys get as much done as you do is it takes two. But even individually,
it takes a lot of us, 100%. I mean, it's a lot of emotional support for each other. And it's funny, growing up in high school, we were in high school theater together. In college, we were president and vice president of the College Democrats. So, we're still roommates in our 30s. So we are definitely just really close and just partners in this work. And I really appreciate those really kind remarks around just the movement and the progressive work in Florida. I have felt that it is so important for everyone to be connected because sometimes the magic that comes from just a relationship and what that can build is so important. And particularly as our opponents, the far right, corporations, they're always trying to divide and conquer us. And so it's really important that we as a movement, we as people stand together, right? And see that our fights are interconnected. And so I see myself often as just that connector. And then I can just the magic just happens. So I appreciate that and always sharing countless Zooms with you and so forth.
Yeah. So let's get into the nitty gritty. Let's talk budget, a big scary word. But recently there was a press conference where folks were talking about demanding a people's budget or a people's agenda from the legislature. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. The People's Budget Campaign is a really exciting effort in Florida. And it's all about putting people in charge of how the state spends your money. If I could bring us up to a bird's eye view a little bit, right? The only constitutional responsibility of the Florida legislature is to pass a budget. And that is your tax dollars. That is a lot of federal dollars, which are still your tax dollars, right? Yep. And it's over $100 billion. And the state, it's a lot of money. And actually, the budget's gotten bigger and bigger in Florida over the last few years. So we're in one of the biggest budgets we've ever had. COVID relief dollars from the federal government were so critical to keeping the state afloat when we saw massive losses in sales tax, because the state of Florida disproportionately relies on sales tax over corporate income tax. And that's by design, because they disproportionately, it's all by design, because who is out here writing the laws in the Florida Capitol? It's corporate donors. And so they always write laws. The tax code serves the corporate class over the working class. And so Floridians disproportionately pay more in taxes than corporations do and billionaires do in Florida. And particularly like the most low income folks, which is disproportionate people of color, carry more of the tax burden in Florida than the richest people who live in this state, right? And so it's all by design. And this is our money that we should have a say in how we spend it. And so the People's Budget campaign is really all about that. It's about bringing people into the policy and budget making process. And really sort of illuminating to the fact that, but the budget, to your point, is like inherently complicated. It's because it's not written for or by us, right? So we the whole effort is around, teaching folks about how your state government is spending your money, giving you a say in how those dollars are spent. And, I always say in politics, there's a lot of nuances, right? There's different personalities, there's rumors, there's like, wonky, all this stuff, right? All this stuff that can just like be really overwhelming and can like add a lot of gray area to stuff. But money's pretty cut and clear. Like that is a value statement. That is your priorities. And so when you really look at how the state is spending money, it doesn't matter about partisanship. Like none of that matters. It's pretty clear where they stand. Who do they want to invest in? Who do your state leaders care about? Is it corporate donors or is it people? It's right there in the budget. So the budget is just such a really powerful tool, not only to invest in our communities so that everyone has the opportunity to thrive in this state, but also to like, put the curtain back and really show like who your state is working for.
Yeah, no, it's about how we invest our money, like what our values are, like you said. And I remember when I first started working, in the political process, because I come from education before coming into politics. And one of my jobs was to analyze this budget, right? And I was just sort of surprised at just how much money goes into so many different things I didn't even know were paid for by our tax dollars. But I mean, a lot of folks don't realize things like the fact that it's got to be done every year. And it's, how our schools are funded, whether or not, college students in Florida will qualify for Bright Futures. They can say that Bright Futures is available, but if they don't fund it in the budget, then they're going to go, oh, we're out of money. Sorry. Guess you're not getting Bright Futures this year. Like stuff that I was like, how is that even a thing? So, and to your point, this is the one mandatory thing that these folks want to do. And I gotta be honest with you, can they just come here and only do the budget? I don't need them to be doing all these laws.
They do enough damage. Like, can we just do the budget and go home? I totally agree.
They have here doing too much. Not to mention the they is like the same people have been in charge for like more than 20 years. So you would think by now they were happy with the laws they've already made, but now they're like, oh, we got to fix all these problems that, you guessed it, we created 10, 20 years ago. So anyway, we'll get into that. Okay. Well, I appreciate you.
Yeah. Do not get me started.
I appreciate you explaining the budget. So it's our money. It's where our money goes to provide us the services. And it's interesting because you also mentioned the tax burden portion. And I think about people that talk to me, so military background, a lot of people I know out of state, and they're like, oh, Florida's low tax. It's so great. No income tax. But like you said, because it's with the sales taxes, if you have less money to work with, the proportion of what you have, you end up spending on your necessities and, other things that are taxed. And so you end up giving more. Plus the loopholes, all the corporate giveaway loopholes. 100%. And stuff, right?
Right. Exactly. Oh, no, you named it. So, and data proves this. We're not just saying it, right? And this is one of my like major pet peeves with the Florida legislature and the folks in charge, is that they put out a lot of stuff where the facts don't line up with any of it, right? So for example, they say, oh, well, sales tax, mostly tourists pay that, not Floridians. false. Like the data shows it's so false. Like every day people who live here are disproportionately paying sales tax and are paying like our whole budget. It's not tourism. Like that's such a lie. And to your point, there's so many corporate tax giveaways in the form of a lot of policy tricks. There's loopholes, there's incentives, there's subsidies, there's breaks, there's grants. Like there are so many legal ways that corporations are not paying the taxes they owe because those corporations wrote the tax code that the leaders in charge of the state of Florida have passed, right? Over a long time. If I could give like a quick little history, Governor Ruben Askew, as Democratic governor in the 70s, he ran on a platform to create a corporate income tax in Florida. And it was a ballot initiative that he ran because the legislature wouldn't do it. And so the voters, so he ran on a campaign to pass a corporate income tax in Florida. All the big corporations, like Winn-Dixie at the time was one of the most powerful corporations in Florida, all opposed it. A lot of the same special interests that we fight today, the Associated Industries of Florida that represents all the big corporations in the state, the Florida Chamber of Commerce, same thing. These are the front groups that corporations pay into to do the dirty work for them so that their logos and the brands are not like in the Capitol, but like their money is, right? And so a lot of those same entities. Oh yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. They know exactly what they're doing. Right. And so a lot of these same entities are the ones that fought the corporate income tax fight in Florida in the 70s. And even despite that, the governor at the time, Ruben Askew, Democratic governor from the Panhandle, he led a ballot initiative campaign to get it on the ballot. And it passed overwhelmingly. I forget the exact numbers, but like every county supported it. It was just overwhelmingly popular. And that's why we even have a corporate income tax in Florida of 5.5%. But in the last like few years, the legislature has they temporarily cut the corporate income tax rate. It's written in a way where 99% of companies don't pay it at all. And the ones that do pay it, it's a secret. We don't know who pays or how much. And they were always trying to evade it too. We had a big win last session when they wanted to basically extend the cut. Because this is, I could go on as you can tell, but I'll say this is one thing corporations do a lot is they will pass a temporary tax break. And then once it's going to expire, they'll come out and say, well, you can't raise taxes on us. Like, and then, heaven forbid. And so it gets extended. So every time there's like a temporary tax break, it's always permanent. That's their goal, right? But we were able to organize like working people, students, renters, like we were able to organize last session and we stopped the bill from passing. And so we were able to restore Florida's already very low and like evasive corporate income tax rate back to the percent of 5.5%. But again, it's still so few pay it while disproportionately Floridians. And it's always working class and people of color that disproportionately pay and carry the burden of taxes in Florida. And again, to your point, so they say it's a low tax state, but when you do the data, it's the people, it's working class folks who pay more than billionaires and corporations. And the things that we need, like healthcare, education, childcare, housing, that end up being a disproportionate part of our budgets as like everyday people versus corporations and billionaires, right? It leads to that we are spending a lot of money on stuff that our state should be investing in so that we all have access. Because this is about economic freedom and opportunity to flourish in this state. And we all have a right to it, especially when it's our tax dollars that we are paying into the state to support us. But instead, it's going as things that are actually working against our freedoms.
Yeah. The gaslighting. It's insane. Like, it's my money.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes.
I deserve fully funded schools. Like, we're already paying
exactly.
for it. Like, also,
100%.
Corporations, we're paying you like all kinds of money for the products you're selling us, and you're coming to our state and using up our resources. And you're not paying to offset that, like draining up our water and plowing down our...
Exactly. And also paying poverty wages to their workers.
Yeah.
It's it's so outrageous. Like just the robbery. They're robbing us, like this is like, we're being robbed. So it's so real. Like these corporations that are buying out politicians to pass laws and make them more money are also paying their workers terrible wages, not providing healthcare coverage to their workers. They are polluting our waters, polluting our air, all for profit. where we are paying the price.
Right. All right. So I feel like we could continue to talk about the budget and taxes and that kind of thing, but we also have folks that are listening that maybe like that's not their jam. I don't know why, because we all have to deal with money, but it's fine. Everybody's different. So what about actual policies? One of the things that I saw yesterday, HB 999, which is like a bill that's going to make it, from what I understand, like banning certain like college majors from people being able to choose whatever major, to potentially getting rid of like multicultural student organizations on campuses and things like that. But if you could just kind of briefly, however briefly, sort of talk to us about what's happening with educational policy this session.
100%. Well, so House Bill 999 is the bill you're talking about, that moved through committee yesterday. And it felt like over 100 people. The committee room was packed with people opposing. There was actually no one who testified in support. The James Madison Institute, which is a far-right think tank that's funded by far-right billionaires, waved in support, couldn't even go out and argue about the benefits of this policy. So overwhelmingly folks opposed it, and it still passed on a party line vote. And that's, the Florida legislature is a twilight zone. It does not line up with anything people want, right? And then when people come out, they limit debate to 45 seconds. Like you took a day off of work, you drove hours to be there, you were sitting in this room, and the chair tells you have 45 seconds to testify about why you oppose this bill. And they're still going to vote on a party line vote. And I think that can let people come to the conclusion that like your voice doesn't matter. And I have to say, no, it does. Like the fact that they put all these roadblocks is because they're scared of us. So it's really important that we show up and make our voices heard, because they do this because they want to disenchant us to think like our voice doesn't matter, but it does. Right. If our voice didn't matter, they wouldn't work this hard to make it so hard for us to have a say, right? Yeah. So come out and turn out. And so it was really beautiful to see so many folks come out. And the bill in a nutshell, to your point, it censors academic freedom. It won't, there's certain degrees like around gender studies, women's studies, Black history, all these things that they will, basically the state is mandating you cannot teach in public colleges and universities. It targets professors around tenure and free speech as well. And it's just, in a lot of ways, these bills are giveaways to far-right donors. Like, because they're basically they're degrading our education system to the benefit of the few. And we're seeing the same thing on public education. House Bill 1 is a massive universal voucher bill is what they call it, basically privatizing public education and giving public funded vouchers, taxpayer dollars, to millionaires and billionaires to send their kids to private schools. And it's taking money away from public schools. And so, and like, I know we were just talking about like budgets and money and right. And
but it's all connected.
Exactly. You finished my sentence for me. It's all connected.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's all connected. And and so all these fights are really about enriching the few with public dollars. So they're taking money out of public schools, out of public universities, out of public K through 12, right? And they're moving it into these like private, far right ideological schools that are also anti-LGBTQ. They are not teaching real history. They're not teaching Black history. They're not teaching about the structural systemic issues that we want to dismantle, because they want to create, a population of Floridians that are uneducated and don't have economic opportunities. And so a lot of it is back to like economic justice, and racial justice is an economic justice fight. Economic justice is a racial justice fight. They're all connected. And when you really look at a lot of these policies that the state is pushing around education, it is specifically removing opportunities for success for Black and brown people, for women, for working class people, for LGBTQ people, for people with disabilities. Like, it's targeting us and our opportunity to succeed. I, as a daughter of working class immigrants from Iran, could not have gone to college without bright futures. And I am here now fighting this system because I studied political science and sociology. And I realized that this is rigged against us. And like, we have to fight and dismantle it. This is what they don't want us to learn. They don't want us to learn this. They want to,
because then you'll fix it.
And they disproportionately, Exactly. And that'll put them out of power. And so it's
Right.
like, it's all there, right? It's very
Yep.
transparent. And I think I had the most like aha moment recently reading these bills when they are specifically targeting job fairs that center like diversity, equity, and inclusion. And
I
they're
missed that.
targeting merit-based scholarships that focus on working class families, like immigrant families and people of color. And, you know, we like people not of means are the folks most impacted by this. Even this
Right.
House Bill 999, a lot of these classes can still be taught in private universities, just not in public universities.
Ooh,
And so
interesting.
even then, the class war, like, so if you can afford a private school, you'll get everything
Sure.
you want. But if you have to go to a
Yeah.
public university, you can't. And so that's why
Yeah.
I've been saying this over and over again. Every single culture war is a class war. Because if you are of means, you can leave the state and get an education. You can get an abortion. You can get gender
I was
affirming
just gonna
care.
say
Like,
that about the abortion.
you can
Yep.
go and get what you want. But if you are working
Mhm.
in middle class, you are here and you cannot leave and get access to these things that are our rights and it's our money. So yeah, anyway, I could go off,
Yeah.
but that's
No, you're
the other
good.
piece on, well, if I could talk a little bit more about education too, in a sense, like, so House Bill 1 is this big privatization bill, $4 billion of our tax dollars going to private schools that are unaccountable, that can discriminate against LGBTQ kids, against kids with disabilities, do not have to provide the basic education that our kids
Right.
deserve. And then House Bill 999 is this big higher ed bill that just dismantles higher education in Florida for public universities. But you're also seeing these bills that target workers' ability to organize. Those are
Mhm.
teachers and educational support staff, bus drivers, custodians. Like, so it's dismantling the power of workers to demand fair wages and benefits who work for schools and for other like public institutions, right? So you're
Mhm.
seeing like this anti-worker agenda that's targeting educational staff, professors, teachers, custodians, bus drivers. Then you're seeing these bills that make school board elections partisan. Then you're seeing the attack on Black history in our schools. Then you're seeing the attack on LGBTQ kids in our schools. You're seeing the
Right.
fight on sex ed in our schools. You're seeing stuff around
Right.
immigrant children, targeting immigrant children and their opportunities. And
Yep.
it could be very easy to see all these things as individual fights. But when you follow the money, it's funded by the same far-right billionaires. And it's the same goal, which is to dismantle education, which is economic opportunity, right? Like,
Yep.
as a daughter of immigrants, that was
Same.
what I always knew. If you study, if you focus, your dreams are a reality, right?
Exactly.
And so when you take away economic opportunity, you're taking away like economic prosperity. You're taking away like any opportunity to stop a cycle of poverty in your family, right? It's targeting our economic prosperity because that is a threat to the status quo. Because when we can pay our bills, then we can vote, then we can get involved, then we can change the system, right? And so, and it's disproportionately impacting the communities that challenge the status quo, that have long been impacted by racial discrimination and class discrimination and all sorts of different civil rights movements, right? And it's because our power is scaring those in charge, right? And they're trying to set a system where they're enriching themselves. They can further fund these systems to our disadvantage through public institutions and our tax dollars, but also push like a very dangerous ideology that erases communities that challenge them, or incarcerates those communities, or just keeps us like divided and uneducated and poor, right? So we see these fights on multiple fronts in education, right? We see efforts to harm workers' right to organize, partisan school board races, privatization of schools, erasing Black history, erasing LGBTQ history. The list goes on and on and on. And we would think these fights are separate, but they're actually one big fight, all funded by the same far-right billionaires that want to enrich themselves off of our public institutions by defunding and moving that money to private entities that they invest in. And they want to push their radical, dangerous ideology on us because they want to keep Floridians divided, uneducated, and taking away our economic prosperity and opportunity so that we can't fight back and that we can't flourish. So we're up against a Goliath, but people power will win.
Well, all this means is you've got to come back subsequent episodes, because I feel like we're not going to cover all these. We're going to have to do one a week. No, this was great. But Ida, if you could, just for folks that are fired up about education, because you got them all fired up, because you got me all fired up, any calls to action? Like, what can we do before we wrap up?
100%. Oh my goodness. There's so many amazing groups that are organizing around this issue. So if you're a student, there's absolutely a student like club organizing around this stuff. So join a registered student organization around a cause you care about and get involved. If you are a professor, the UFF, United Faculty of Florida, is leading a lot of this effort. If you're a worker, AFL-CIO, SEIU, your different labor unions are fighting on these issues. Groups like Florida Rising, Florida Immigrant Coalition, Faith in Florida, the Florida for All Coalition are leading these fights. I guarantee you, if there's an issue you care about, there is an organization that's on the ground doing it, and they need your support. Equality Florida, Planned Parenthood, these are old groups on the ground in the Capitol, day in and day out, organizing people and advocating for these causes that we care about. And that includes, you don't have to just go to the Capitol. You can find who your lawmaker is, go to myfloridahouse.gov, flsenate.gov, identify who your state lawmaker is, reach out to them. They're counting on you to think your voice does not matter. And I'm telling you, it does. It makes a huge difference. And so whether you can donate, you can do a lobby day or call your lawmaker, you can door knock, help register voters. There is a cause. I'll give one last sort of uplift to People Power for Florida, my sister's voter registration organization that is also organizing around college campuses and legislative session. And so please, visit People Power for Florida and get involved there. They are scared of our power, and that is why they've created a system to silence us, to censor us, to divide us, and to take away our prosperity. But, we are not going anywhere. This is our state. This is our money, and we are here to stay. So just really want to encourage folks not to get to stand in your power and remind yourself that, this is our state, and we have every right to have a say in what they do with our money.
Hell yeah. Well, you heard it from Ida. Thank you so, so much. We will not give up the fight. And like I said earlier, I would love for you to come back. But for now,
I'd love to come back. Listen, if you just want me to yell about stuff, girl, call me up.
Yeah.
Like...
Awesome.
Usually it's into the ether. So if I get to yell at y'all, I mean, cool.
Yep. Thank you so much, Ida.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all that y'all do, and just keeping a watch on the shenanigans in the state capitol. So much of what they fear is us exposing and just shining a light. Yeah. So the work y'all do is so important because people can't organize and we don't know what's going on. So keep up the good work.
Exactly.
Florida has faced a growing affordability crisis with the cost of rent, utility bills, and insurance going through the roof. All while Ron DeSantis has tried to divide us and distract us from the favors he does for his billionaire corporate donors to advance his political ambitions. DeSantis Watch is a project dedicated to shining a spotlight on the governor's failures of leadership that make all of us less free. Go to DeSantisWatch.org and join the movement. This show and all of our work would be impossible without your support. At Florida Watch, we do research, create graphics and video content, and keep an eye on issues that matter to all of us. We also work hard to keep things fun and informative with our goal to hold accountable extreme politicians like Ron DeSantis. Head over to FloridaWatch.org and click donate to support our cause to help keep up the fight to keep Florida educated, fair, and tolerant.
Thank you guys so much for joining. It's been an action-packed episode, talking with Brandon, talking with Ida, going through the news. I'm just really grateful that you all are listening and are interested in what's happening in Florida politics. If you have any questions or want to be featured on our show, please be sure to send us an email at podcast@floridawatch.org. That's podcast@floridawatch.org. And this is Natasha with Keeping Watch. See you next time.